Potential GDP. We believe that in the long run, economies are going to gravitate towards their potential GDP. That's the level where all resources are fully employed. From the solo growth model that we did a while ago, all resources primarily means labor, capital, and technology. When labor is fully employed, that means zero cyclical unemployment. But there may still be some frictional unemployment. Capital and effective labor are tough to measure. We can't say to what extent that's entirely true. Effective labor includes skills and education, even if the number of people were constant. We're concerned with both quality and quantity. You can make a plausible argument that a lot of government policy ought to concern the long run. Slow, steady improvements of productivity. Even if they're not going to change anybody's life overnight, still those generate transformative levels of wealth changes over long stretches of time. Recall from the Rule of 70, even just 1.5% productivity growth means real incomes double in about 47 years. It's not the sort of thing people notice overnight. 1.5% a year? Not even going to notice in a year, maybe. But doubling a country's income per capita? That matters. That's a big deal. I mean, it might take 50 years, but it's still going to make a huge improvement in people's living standards. So maybe government policies are a little too concerned with changes that will have an impact in the next couple of years, particularly if those next couple of years are right before an election. But still, effective policies can make transformations. Now, if economies tend towards potential GDP in the long run, how long is the long run? It depends. It really depends. Economies can seem to stabilize at GDP levels far below potential for relatively long stretches of time, perhaps decades. Is that due to policy mistakes, which could be corrected? Or is that due to frictions or other things that are tougher to change? If prices were more flexible, would the economy get to potential quicker? Worse, can long stretches where the economy is below potential actually reduce the potential? The fancy name for that is hysteresis, that GDP can get stuck being too low. Perhaps people who are unemployed for too long have their skills depreciate, so cyclical unemployment can become structural unemployment. Some European economies have been facing this issue for decades with elevated levels of unemployment. Now, economists consider if there are frictions in how prices are set. In a simple supply-demand model, if the price is not moving for some reason, then the quantity supplied might be different from the quantity demanded. So how are prices set in the economy? How do people react to inflation or deflation? People generally look to the past to make a forecast about the future. Rational expectations is a hypothesis that people will use all available information and not make systematic errors. Which is not to say they're always right, but the errors are not systematic. Sometimes forecasts are too high, sometimes too low, but on average, they're good. Probably that describes some people better than others, or describes some people in some aspects of their decision. A field called behavioral economics shows cases where even sophisticated, well-informed people can make systematic errors. Bottom line, we might say that monetary and fiscal policy sometimes works by fooling people. The government prints extra money, but if the economy is already above potential and the people who get the money think it represents extra resources, they're going to shift their demand outward, and some sellers might be tricked into working overtime or working harder to meet the increased demand. But eventually the price level rises, inflation sets in, sellers realize they were fooled. Can policymakers fool all the people all the time? Some of the people some of the time? Back when we talked about the aggregate supply curve, we said there could be a short-run positive slope, but not in the long run. Same for the Phillips curve. Maybe there's a short-run Phillips curve where there's a trade-off between unemployment and inflation, but in the long run, the Phillips curve might be very steep, nearly vertical. If the economy is going to stabilize towards potential GDP, then that produces a natural rate of unemployment. Then inflation is just going to be higher or lower, depending on the choices of monetary policy or fiscal policy.